This is Andi Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by Frank Smith here in Saudi Arabia. Frank, good to see you. How is life treating you?
Yeah, good mate. Good to be here, back in Riyadh. Massive night, Friday, and it's we're in for an entertaining week. All kicks off today, Sunday. Bit early for a fight week to start, but yeah, it's good to be here.
So usually now you just seem to roll Eddie out for these events, but he's not here.
I know. So they've had to roll me out. I feel like Eddie, but just not as good. He's here. He's on his way now. He's on his way from New York. He was with Ray Ford last night, celebrating that win. So he's flying from New York. He'll be here in the morning. So you get to spend some time with him.
Well, Ray Ford was who I wanted to start this topic of conversation and this interview with. An unbelievable turnaround of events last night. Down on the scorecards, it would have been a majority decision defeat, and yet he pulls it out of the bag, or a split decision defeat, sorry. Pulls it out of the bag with 7 seconds left to go. What a story, what a night for Ray Ford.
100%, it's what the sport's all about. You know, he's dreamt of that moment for years and years and years, and especially against a guy that no one wanted to fight in Kholmatov. You know, no one wanted to take on that challenge. Many people in the sport had said for years how good Kholmatov was, and what a win from him. He's worked so hard, and it's his first homegrown sort of US talent we brought through. We signed him 5 years ago, and so happy for him because he deserves it. And there's big nights to come for him now.
You've just mentioned he's the first guy you've taken on from the beginning of their careers from the USA side of things. Does that put a bit more pressure on the likes of, say, your Diego Pacheco's, the Mark Castro's, the other guys you signed at early stage in their careers to start to progress towards a similar level now?
Yeah, 100%. Look, it's not easy, to get to that level of the sport, to win a world championship. And he did it, as I say, in one of the hardest fights against a real fighter. It wasn't some gimme world title. But we believe Diego Pacheco, who you mentioned there, he's one of those that will go on and we believe can rule the sport for a long time. He's just 23 years old, had an unbelievable career, and he's really coming into his own, and he wants all the big fights now. But it's about doing it at the right time as well, and going through the right process to get to that point. But yeah, Diego's one of those. Mark Castro, as you say, he's still got. Mark's probably a little bit further behind those guys, in terms of step ups. But yeah, it's a special moment, and to be with someone from day one and get to that point, it makes it even better. A load of the team were out there with him, so yeah, it was a special night.
I'll watch the fight, Frank, and how much did it pay off putting him in those difficult and tough fights at an early stage of his career? People talk about that Vazquez fight in particular, and he's had some tough fights. How well prepared that's made him for what he went through last night?
100%. That's what you need as well. You need to be built at the right pace. You can't go from these easy fights into a night like that. I think also, the team he's got around him as well. The other fighters, the likes of Shakur Stevenson, will play a big part as well. That Shakur's a tremendous fighter, but to have him in your camp as well, day in, day out, I think that adds a lot, to everything, and gets him ready for those kind of nights. But yeah, look, I think Kevin Rooney especially has done a tremendous job matching him, building him up to that point. But at the end of the day, he got in there and he delivered. And, had to come back through a hard fight to do what he did. And what a finish. What a finish.
Just with Ray, and you look towards the future now, I've obviously seen the comments since where he suggested he'd happily kind of vacate and move up now because it wasn't an easy weight cut for him. But he's also suggested if it's a quick turnaround and that 5 versus 5, he'd be up for it. What's the plan, Frank?
Yeah, look, you've obviously got Nick Balls fighting Ray Vargas on Friday night. The winner of that's a massive fight. Those two coming together. I think that's a fight that could be possible. It's, what are we, we're 12 weeks away, 13 weeks away, something like that. He had a bit of a cut from the fight. Hopefully, that will heal quite quickly. But I think that's a possibility. But let's see, there's lots ongoing with that 5v5. I think it would be great to try and unify and then move up. But at the same time, we'll be led by him and what he wants to do in his body. And but he's in a great place now. He's big fights out there to be made for him.
I know, as you mentioned, Nick Ball, if he was to be successful, the likes of Lee Wood and Josh Warrington have both been mentioned for that potential fight. When the tournament and the names get announced, is it just one fight per weight category, or could you have 2 fights from the same category? What can you tell me on that front?
At the minute, it's two weights picked by each promoter and one by His Excellency. So
did you say pick lightweight, but then Frank could also pick lightweight, so you'd have 4 fighters in 2 fights? Or?
I think we'd have to obviously we sort of have an understanding of how many fighters there are, because otherwise it would be impossible, and you'd be sat there and you wouldn't have, like you'd have a 3-0 fighter fighting a 26-0, and it wouldn't make any sense. So, but I think if there's fights there, if there's a multiple of fighters at a weight division, there's potential there for sure.
Moving away from all things right forwardly, would Josh Warrington, I did in fact stick with Josh Warrington. I saw you guys had a little meeting the other day. What can you tell me about the latest with Josh?
Yeah, in discussions around, look, we've been working for a long time to try and make the City ground work for that Lee Wood rematch. That unfortunately didn't happen. The ground wasn't available. That was really the way to make it work. We are looking at some other routes now as well. Part of us, one of the discussions is the potential Mauricio Lara fight. There's a lot of spite between those two. Between him and Josh Warrington, there's history as well that's probably unsettled in some way from that second fight that finished on cuts. So that's a potential fight as well. So we're just working through it, and hopefully some news soon.
For many people, Mauricio Lara somewhat underperformed in his most recent outing. Is that just a kind of a sign with him that he needs the big fights if he's going to produce his best?
I think so. I think that's the case with a lot of fighters as well. They need to be driven to have a big performance, and going in some of these fights they can't get out for. I'm not saying that's right, but I think that's the reality of it. So, it's still a fight I'd love to see.
Obviously, moving on to this week, big week, Anthony Joshua, Francis Ngannou. In the build-up to the Otabek fight, there was a lot of talk about AJ's demeanour, how he was with the media. A lot more chilled and relaxed today. What do you make of that difference and that comparison?
I think everyone questions AJ's demeanour. Everyone questions every answer he gives. Everyone questions, for some reason, but I suppose for some reason it's because he's in the position he's in. People are going to question everything he does. He can't really win. He gives too long answers, he gives too short answers, everyone's got a view on it. But at the end of the day, he's in a great place. I think the momentum has been key for him. I think activity, those 4 fights, well, this will be 4 fights in 11 months, has been great. And I think we're going to keep seeing improvements from him. He's in a good way. He's in a real good place, and it's great to see.
I think I said this to him earlier, considering the lie of the land in the heavyweight division, obviously with Fury-Usyk taking place, Wilder's defeat, Ngannou is arguably probably the biggest fight for him. Doesn't necessarily position him for a world title fight, but it is the biggest fight for him. With that in mind, what challenges does Ngannou pose? Is that element of surprise out of the window now because you've seen what he can do against Tyson Fury?
I think anyone who's that size, poses a threat. And we saw that in the Tyson Fury fight, and that's why we love heavyweight boxing, because anything can happen. Who would have thought? And again, people can say they gave him a chance. I don't think a lot of people gave him the chance and thought he was going to do what he did. And you have to commend him for it. His first professional fight, he goes in there against, many people perceive to be the #1 heavyweight in the world, and did what he did. It doesn't add anything. I don't personally think it adds anything to it. You're going in there against a huge guy who can punch. And that's the threat in this fight. I don't think he's not going to go and outbox him, but he can punch. And that's why heavyweight boxing is so great. And that's what made the Tyson Fury fight so great. There's added jeopardy there in terms of you've actually seen him do it now. It's all well and good talking about it, but UFC, boxing is 2 completely different things. And but that's why people are going to tune in, because there's always going to be that jeopardy there.
Frank, obviously in the build-up to the Otabek fight, there was a lot of talk about that Deontay Wilder bout, and as it drew ever closer, reports came out, the deal was agreed, it was signed. Both mentioned that to come through their respective bouts. Since then, obviously that didn't come to fruition. Deontay lost. Is there anything in a few of the reports that if Fury-Usyk wasn't to go ahead, AJ's in prime position to step in and face one of those guys?
I think anything's possible. There's nothing in place, but I just think anything's possible, as they've shown here, as His Excellency's shown. He moves very quickly. He gets the biggest fights on. So it was just like the Wilder stuff. While that fight was supposed to be set, I'm so happy for Joseph Parker. We worked very hard for that, and it was a fight. The Wilder fight was one we all wanted to see, but. They move quickly. They want to put on the biggest possible fights, as they've shown every time. Every time there's an issue, they move quickly. When they rescheduled Fury-Usyk, they rescheduled it within a matter of 36 hours, 24 hours, whatever. You don't see that. So I just think they want the biggest fights possible, and that's what we'll get to see. And we're all lucky as well as fans to be able to see that.
On that note, then, does that mean, provided AJ comes through Friday night unscathed and with his hand raised, does he have to effectively go back into camp immediately, just on the off chance that he might be required?
I think AJ's, has always been a pro. He's always been in the gym. He's always been training hard. I think for a boxer though, you need to know your opponent. You need to know what you're going into. So it's not like he's going to go off and slob out and not go to the gym. That's his life. It's what he's always done. I think you can't really sit there though and plan for a multiple of fights. He's been busy, he's been active. Like I say, he's had 4 fights in 11 months. Probably needs a bit of time after this. And again, it depends how the fight goes. It's all dependent on this fight. But he'll stay active, he'll stay busy, and he's always been ready. He's had fights back to back to back, and after that December fight was with a 6-week lead time, and that's because he's fit and he takes it seriously. So anything's possible in the sport, but fully focused on Friday night though.
Never had a chance to ask him in the brief time I got with him, but obviously there was a lot of talk about how long he might be with Ben. If you go back to Derek James, is he firmly now in the mindset of Ben Davison is my lead trainer moving forward?
I think he's been in the UK, he's had very short time frames, and I think, as you've seen, it's worked very well. And I think you'll continue to see that on Friday night. I think he's still got a great relationship with Derek James, but right now, we had a 6-week lead time before. I think he had 9 weeks for this one with the press conference. It's back to back. There's not much time, but I think they've made a great pairing. And Lee Wiley as well in the gym, and Barry. And you only have to look at what they're doing with other fighters as well, not just Anthony Joshua. So I think he spoke about, I saw an interview where he spoke about the belief and having that belief, and that's what he's got, and it's good to see.
Parker Zhang, Frank, you're not involved with either fighter now, but you used to promote both. I don't know if you crossed over at any point, but what's your thoughts on that fight again? A terrific matchup.
Yeah, look, I think Joseph Parker's an amazing story in terms of 5 years ago when he lost against Anthony Joshua. Then he came back and he's built his way back through, been involved. He's always taken real fights, and that's what people want to see. And then he lost against Joe Joyce. Who would have then thought he'd go on to beat Deontay Wilder and now be in a fight, chief support? You can't write anyone off, and he seems to be getting better and better. And he's given his life to it. And Andy Lee's been tremendous for him. Zhang as well. Those 2 wins against Joe Joyce back to back. He's changed his career as well. So it's a great fight. Looking forward to seeing them both. I get on really well with them both. So excited. And look, whoever comes through that one really sets him up for some big nights. I'm not sure if there's a rematch in there. But it's some big fights.
Is it a surprise to you that they've put a rematch clause in? I'm sure you're probably fed up of talking about rematch clauses, but a surprise for a fight like that?
To blame.
Yeah. This time.
Yeah. I think Zhang's the WBO interim, essentially, isn't he? It's one of those things. I think if it's a great fight and people want to see it again, it will be entertaining. So one of those things, I can understand it.
And Frank, just a final thing, obviously, I believe Conor Benn had his case in his hearing last week. Any update yet of the outcome?
Not yet. We're obviously Sunday today. News very soon. Hopefully, any time in the coming days, we'll have that update, and it'll be a positive update. We want to get him back boxing in the UK. He's a star in UK boxing, and we want him back. And there's some big nights to be made. So hopefully, news very soon.
It's all obviously speculative at this moment in time, but when that news comes out, say if it's negative, do you still look to box in the UK, but go for a different board?
No, I think, look, we have to. Our full focus right now is him coming out with a positive hearing test. He's won before. He won his first case. He then won this case. They appealed it. Now it's the third go. And hopefully everything is positive in the next few days, and we can move forward.
And obviously there are talks in the background at a minute over potential fights for kind of whatever it may be next. Seems to be a lot of those are American names. Is the plan to still push him towards that American market, or if his case is approved and he's successful, he'll fight one of those American names back in the UK?
He's in the. I've spoken about it a bit. I think he's in the top 4 British names right now. I'd love to see him fight in the UK, and even against one of those American names. I think he'd sell out the O2 in a world title challenge. I think Eddie's spoken about 3 or 4 potential fights for him. There's massive fights. Everyone's calling out Conor Benn's name because they know how big of a fight it is. So yeah, for me, it's about focusing on the UK and getting him back in the UK.
So the other name, a big UK name, is Chris Eubank Jr. Wait and see what's the latest with him. Is that still, again, where does that rank in amongst all of this?
Look, it's my personal aim in my life before I die to see that fight.
Even if it's in like 20 years' time?
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it with the kids and the kids. But I spent a lot of time on it. A lot of time and energy on that over the last year or so. It's the fight that makes the most sense, for me. But that's my personal view. I'm not saying it's anyone else's. I will always work my bollocks off to try and make that fight happen. I think it's the biggest fight out there. It's the fight that makes the most sense for both of them. And I think I would love to see it. But I'm not going to talk about it too much because we've spoken about it too much. It's been a never-ending saga. So hopefully we can all shut up about it and we can get it done in silence in the background and we can announce it. But that's just me as Frank Smith sitting here because I've spent so much time on it. So let's see.
Frank, just a final one, man, and links with a Eubank name. If Chris Eubank Jr. can't or doesn't accept terms and fight doesn't go ahead, does Harlem Eubank become a bit more of an attractive proposition at all?
I don't think it's realistic right now, being completely honest. I don't think it's realistic. Look, everyone wants to see that Chris Eubank Jr. fight. It's what people are talking about. It's what people want to see. Not saying down the road it doesn't change, but Conor wants the biggest fights possible. And look, Chris Eubank Jr. is the biggest. I think for both of them is the biggest fight that makes the most amount of sense. And if not, there's a lot of other names. We've been spoken about. Conor will fight anyone, but he wants the biggest fights possible. But doesn't mean down the road it can't be.
Frank, in and amongst all of the madness of today's media day, I forgot to ask you about one topic which has come out. Dillian Whyte's case. He's been allowed to return with his boxing career, allowed to continue with it because of findings from the Texas Commission. What can you tell me from your behalf?
I don't know, but you just grabbed me back from my pitta. That was enjoying. Yeah, look, I'm sure he's worked very hard in the background to get back to that position. I probably know as much as you, being completely honest. I saw the news half an hour ago, whatever it was, an hour ago. I saw the article. But yeah, I'm sure he'll be focused on getting back in there. He's had a long time out of the ring now, 18 odd months, and he'll want to get back in there, get active, and get busy, and get in those big fights.
Obviously, that positive test he did have come prior to what would have been an Anthony Joshua rematch. Do fights as big as that immediately start to come back to the forefront of your mind, or does he have to go down a slower route to build back in? What kind of conversations do you look at?
I think he needs a. With that long out of the ring, he probably now will want some kind of fight to come back with. But anything's possible. Look, he's a big name in the heavyweight division, and I'm sure there's big fights out there to be made. But there's lots going on. There's lots going on out here. There's lots of big fights happening. There's lots of plans already in motion as well. So he'll be wanting to get back in there as soon as possible.
Frank, I appreciate you coming back just to finish off this interview. My bad for forgetting to ask. You can do, yeah. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.